Joker, Folie Deux has just exploded onto our cinema screens. In this video we will be diving straight into its deeper themes and symbolism, and how it is the punchline to the setup of the first movie. There will be spoilers. Let us begin. We build barriers to try and hold back the chaos, but eventually, somewhere, somehow, it breaks through. The clown symbolises these overturning forces of chaos. As Myuu writes, clowns oscillate between sadness and happiness, showing that one aspect secretly hides its opposite. These fools spend most of their time fooling others, but always end up fooling themselves in the grand finale. The act of the clown has an unpredictable energy which can be profoundly disruptive, but ultimately, it's self-destructive, like a snake eating its own tail. Together, these two movies tell that tragic story, and there is one crucial dynamic running throughout: the interplay between fantasy and reality, the interplay between what's going on in Arthur Fleck's imagination and the cold hard facts of the world around him. Here's how it works in Joker 1. First, we are shown the fantasy, then we are shown the reality. We see Arthur being welcomed onto the stage by his comedy hero, Murray Franklin. That's the fantasy, Arthur's dream for how such an encounter would proceed. And later, we see the reality. A clip of Arthur's stand-up is played on the show and ridiculed by Murray. The gulf between fantasy and reality is devastating, and it culminates with Arthur killing Murray.
You just wanted to make fun of me.
Here's another one. Arthur is led to believe that he is the child of Penny Fleck and Thomas Wayne. That's the fantasy. But it turns out that Penny is delusional. Arthur was adopted and abused as a child. Thomas Wayne wants nothing to do with him. That's the reality. The gulf between fantasy and reality is devastating, and it culminates with Arthur killing Penny. And then there's the love interest, Arthur's neighbour, Sophie. A woman who seems to love him and understand him. That's the fantasy. But eventually we discover that Sophie barely knows him and is even afraid of him. Their romance existed entirely in his head. That's the reality. The gulf between fantasy and reality is devastating, but Arthur does not harm her. In his mind, the possibility of a romantic encounter remains intact, and that's what we see in the sequel. In the depths of Arkham State Hospital, Arthur meets Lee, and there is an instant connection. She mimes shooting herself, just as Sophie did when they first met. It's a sign. This time, could it actually be real? This brings about a profound shift in the storytelling. It becomes a musical. And in a musical, reality and fantasy are brought into alignment. The characters burst into song and dance, an expression of their joy, and they are accompanied by a full orchestra, which neither we nor they can see for a lot of the time. The boundary between reality and fantasy is blurred. From Arthur's perspective, things have changed. Before, he would dance alone, only he could hear the music. The reality would always fall short of the fantasy. But now he's experiencing both at the same time. He now has a companion, someone who can help him generate the fantasy and begin to make it a reality. It's a twisted kind of paradise, but to them it is a kind of paradise. As Lee says, we're gonna build a mountain. She wants to help him finish what he started, tearing down the existing systems of Gotham and empowering the outcasts to build something new. This is reminiscent of the prophecy in the ancient text of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar was given a dream, and in the dream he saw a giant statue representing the kingdoms of this world, and a tiny rock, not cut by human hands, smashed into its feet. The entire statue toppled to the ground and disintegrated. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Lee implicitly sees Joker as the fulfillment of this prophecy. He is the one to topple the kingdom of Gotham and build a new mountain with her by his side. And you can see why she might have come to that conclusion after watching Joker's appearance on TV.
If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. You think men like Thomas Wayne ever think what it's like to be someone like me?
It's a powerful piece of oratory. It's deeply reminiscent of the parable of the Good Samaritan, the short story that Jesus tells in Luke 10. Here's Kingpin, a Marvel villain, to explain.
I was thinking about a story from the Bible. There was a man, he was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was set upon by men of ill intent. And they stripped the traveler of his clothes, they beat him, and they left him bleeding in the dirt. And the priest happened by, saw the traveler. They moved to the other side of the road and continued on. And then a Levite, a religious functionary, he saw the dying traveler, but he too moved to the other side of the road. But then came a man from Samaria, Samaritan, a good man. The Samaritan tended to the traveler's wounds, applying oil and wine. He carried him to an inn. He did this simply because the traveler was his neighbor.
Now, both Arthur and Kingpin are grappling with the same question. Who am I in the Good Samaritan story? Arthur sees himself as the victim, the man bleeding out on the road. He has lost hope in the possibility of a Good Samaritan.
If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. Everybody is awful these days. It's enough to make anyone crazy.
And if, as Arthur asserts, the whole system is corrupt, then what will the victim do?
What do you get?
I don't think so.
When you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that abandons him and treats him like trash.
Call the police,
I'll
Gene.
tell you what you get.
Call the police.
You get what you f***ing deserve.
Interestingly, Kingpin casts himself as a different character in the parable.
I always thought that I was the Samaritan in that story. It's funny, isn't it? How even the best of men can be deceived by their true nature.
What the hell does that mean?
It means that I'm not the Samaritan, that I'm like the priest or the Levite, that I am the ill intent who set upon the traveler on a road that he should not have been on.
The Joker fantasy is all about maintaining an underdog mentality, punching up at the elites. It's a message that resonates with many of the disenfranchised people of Gotham. Kingpin, on the other hand, has climbed the rungs of power and become an elite himself, punching down at those who threaten his rule. And he's happy to own that fact. He is the ill intent who sets upon travellers who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. So both villains have power, but in very different forms. Both do terrible things, but they justify them in very different ways. In Folie Deux, we were expecting to see the inexorable rise of Joker and Harley. We were expecting to see them grow into those iconic Batman villains. But the huge twist of the movie is that Arthur comes to realise that he has had enough. He no longer wants to peddle the Joker fantasy. In his final address to the court, he says, "I can't do this anymore, because I can't be who you want me to be. It was all just a fantasy. There is no Joker. It's just me. I killed 6 people. I wish I didn't, but I did. Nobody knows, but I also killed my mother. Put a pillow over her face and smothered her to death. I just want to blow it all up and start a new life. Knock knock. Who's there? Arthur Fleck." So what are we seeing there? We're seeing that Joker was a mask. Arthur has decided to take off the mask and drop the act. And as a result, Lee rejects him. She says, "All we had was the fantasy, and you gave up." Lee fell in love not with Arthur Fleck, but with Joker. She fell in love with what she saw of him on TV. And now that the mask is gone, she's no longer interested.
When the laughter stops, when the audience departs, when the makeup has been removed, what is left of the clown? Nothing but an empty costume.
And all these threads are woven together at the end of the film. Arthur is approached in the corridors of Arkham by a younger patient who once looked up to him. The patient tells him this joke. A psychopath walks into a bar and sees this famous clown sitting there, all alone, totally drunk. It's pathetic. "I can't believe you're here," he says. "What a disappointment. I used to watch you on TV. What can I get you?" And this clown turns and says, "Well, if you're buying, you can get me anything." "Perfect," the psychopath says. "How about I get you what you effing deserve?" And with that, the patient stabs Arthur, using Arthur's own line against him.
Get what you f***ing deserve!
Arthur crumples to the floor and bleeds to death. Arthur is the agent of chaos who started this movement in the first place, but he was never really in control of it. And so, when he decides to back down, his followers won't let him. It's Joker or it's death. Arthur killed the fantasy, and now the movement he started kills him. Together, these two films make a devastating tragedy. We witness a man's descent into darkness. The first movie shocked the world because it shattered all our assumptions about how such a criminal could arise. We wanted to find someone to blame, a simple explanation for why Arthur became what he became, but none of our narratives would fit. His upbringing had dealt him a cruel hand, yet he was also responsible for his evil. And he begins to come to terms with this in the sequel. He says, "I killed 6 people. I wish I didn't, but I did." And the film ends with him bleeding out on the floor, but not at the hands of robbers, or Gotham elites, or the media, or the guards of Arkham. No, it's at the hands of someone he inspired, someone less willing than himself to let go of the Joker fantasy. The clown ends up fooling himself in the grand finale. He dares to believe that he might be able to start a new life without the Joker mask. But the world won't let him. This is a Gotham which doesn't yet have a Batman. This is the road from Jerusalem to Jericho without a Good Samaritan. Nothing justifies Arthur's evils, and it is right that he is locked up. But he is right in one thing: there's a rottenness to this city. Much like reality, we find ourselves in a world full of darkness. We ourselves are complicit in that darkness to varying degrees. Interestingly, whatever you make of it, the Bible depicts Christ both as the fulfillment of the prophecy. He is the rock from beyond who tears down the corruption, and he is the ultimate Good Samaritan figure. He says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." I'm not surprised by the mixed reactions to this sequel, but I did find it to be a tragic and disturbing meditation on the self-destructive nature of evil. What do you think? Hello, Thomas here. You might enjoy a short film I directed called The Telltale Heart. It's based on the Edgar Allan Poe short story of the same name, and we had a lot of fun with it. Loads of practical effects and unhinged performances. And you can watch it by clicking here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. On this channel, I try to look at film from a different perspective, and sometimes I have a go at making films myself. Thank you so much for watching. Do subscribe if you'd like to stay in the loop, and I will be back soon. Goodbye.